December 16th, and it is episode number 6 of The Grail. How are you guys? Thank you for joining me again. We're getting a little bigger each week, building it one subscriber at a time on iTunes and YouTube. Dean Del Rey, The Grail. Yeah. I thought it'd be a good idea to give myself another 40 hours of work a week. Why not? It's COVID. What do I got to do? Anyway, I'm glad you guys dig it, and I really enjoy doing this show, actually. Great guest today. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. This guy right here is responsible for the Grail artwork. Now, if you've seen the artwork for the podcast, this man, Brian Romero, drew the artwork, and he is a unbelievable artist. And I had to have him on because there's these type of people. They have a special gift, man. Painters, people that draw, all that shit that you see every day driving down the highway, billboards, album covers, cereal boxes. Anything, everything has some kind of art on it. And you just don't realize that there are people out there that are doing this art. Unless you're a weirdo like me and you look at the Count Chocula cereal box one day and you're like, wow, I wonder who did that. And then all of a sudden, you're into Snoopy and Charlie Brown Christmas, and then you get into the edgy weird shit of Freak Brothers and R. Crumb and Fat Freddy's Cat, and then you get an Appetite for Destruction album cover by Guns N' Roses, and you're like, who the fuck did this amazing original art? Robert Williams, who the hell is that? All this art has been swirling in my mind for years. And so when I can work with someone that has mad skills, it really, really makes me happy. And that's what I did with Brian. I told him the idea for the Grail, the exact thing I wanted, and this fucking guy crushed it. He comes from the same world. We like the same stuff. Skateboarding, BMX, rock and roll, guitars. We like all the same artists. So when you can find someone that understands the lingo, then it's on. And I want to shout out Kevin Christie for turning me on to Brian, because Kevin does all my art, and Kevin is just fantastic. But he knew I was looking for this specific type of style, and he said, this is going to be your guy. And wow, did Brian kill it. So anyway, I want you guys to enjoy this. And when you're listening to it, think about some of your favorite art. Is it an album cover? Is it a skateboard? Is it a billboard you saw? Is it some graffiti on the side of a building? Is it whatever? Is it a rock and roll logo? Is it a t-shirt? It's all art. And somebody sat down and either drew it or painted it or figured out how to do it on a computer. However they do it, it takes time and it takes massive, massive skills. And Brian's got that, man. This guy. Great episode. And I want to thank you guys all for supporting this show. I want to give a shout out to my sponsors. First one is CBDlion.com. The best CBD on the planet. You can use the code DEAN and get 20% off. CBDlion.com. I'm using their topical stuff, their lotions on my neck. They got a roll-on. It's like a mentholated CBD roll-on, and I just roll that on my neck once a day. I haven't had any pain or joint aches for over a year. And then when I want to get some good sleep in, I use their tinctures. And they also have pet tinctures. If you got a crazy dog who's got some anxiety or is a little cuckoo, You give them a little secret CBD sauce and they'll be just chilling on the couch. CBDlion.com. Use the code DEAN, 20% off. Not just once, but every time. Use the code over and over and over. Buy as many items as you want. Also, I want to thank my other sponsor, the incredible boutique guitar builder, Mr. Banker himself, Matt, my man, Banker Guitars. Go to bankertoguitar.com. Let me make sure that's right. It's either Banker Guitar or Banker Guitars. I should have looked before, but I'm a fucking asshole. You know, it's bankerguitar.com. Go there, order your dream guitar. Marcus King rocks the shit out of it. So does Mastodon. All kinds of great people. Scott, my man Scott from Rival Sons, kills it with a Banker guitar. Tone City. You need some tone. You need some handmade super guitars. Go to Banker Guitars. All right. Follow him, Mr. Banker, on Instagram. Is that right? God damn. Got to check again. I think it's Mr. Banker. Here it is. It's Mr. Banker Custom. And look at some of the shit he's got up right now. Oh my God. Carina V's and Explorers. My favorite boutique guitar builder. Check him out. Okay. We got all the fun stuff out of the way. Don't forget, like I said, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Tell your buddies about it. And have a great weekend. Stay healthy and safe. And happy birthday, Bill Hicks, today. Happy birthday to the greatest ever, Bill Hicks. Candles are lit. Here we go. You doing some art today?
Yeah, I'm doing stuff for, well, it's not a public project announced yet, but for Airbnb.
Airbnb?
Yeah.
So I got to cut that out?
No, I just can't talk about what it is, but
I got you.
But it's a big project in terms of massive amounts of illustration. So,
Rad. How'd they find you? Instagram?
No, I'd worked with them before they're even a real company. My friend Ben Teagle and I were hired to do these cereal boxes for them, which were a promotional item that kind of got them noticed in that Y Combinator group in Silicon Valley. And they were, trying to get started and they need something to stand out. So they were launching Airbnb for the conventions in 2008, for the political conventions.
Right.
So it was for the DNC and for the RNC. And they wanted to say, hey, instead of it staying in a hotel, you can use our service and find a room in the city without getting a hotel. And so they hired us to do 2 cereal boxes. One that was Obama. It was like Obama O's, and then Captain McCain's, which was like Captain Crunch.
in the style of art that you do?
Well, it's much more toned down and very cereal boxy. It's just that kind of classic cereal box style. Right.
Love it. Love the cereal box. I mean, that's early art to me, when you look at Count Chocula and Boo Berry and Captain Crunch and Fruity Pebbles, all that had just the coolest art, Yeah,
the Lucky Charms guy, the Cocoa Puffs bird who'd go crazy.
Yeah. It's funny because I look at art the same way I look as music, as like, I think a lot of people just go through life and don't wonder, I wonder who wrote that song, or I wonder who actually drew those cereal boxes. I mean, we take in so much visuals daily that I think most people just go through life and just expect it to be, visually pleasing, where to me, I stop for a minute and go, wait a minute, who did that? What's the background on that? Were there earlier versions of that? Every kind of type of art, I mean, even like candy boxes. There was that early racist hot tamale box. It just had the Hispanic guy with the sombrero leaning up against a cactus. That would never fly now. But
Yeah.
but this is early art of stuff when you're a kid and you realize even BMX, oh my God, and skateboarding, that's all massive art.
Yeah. I mean, people don't realize how much design and illustration are still being used today. Like every piece of packaging, there's a human being that had to put that together. And the stuff that stands out, someone, spent the time to make it look that good. And it survived, whatever approval processes it took to get to the shelf. That's another thing people don't realize. Like, why is this, piece of art or design that's commercial art, like, why is it so terrible? Well, it probably didn't start out that way.
yeah. The guy had a vision and then they just kept knocking it down to where it just became nothing.
Yeah. Well, some projects, for me, like there's less people involved. That's usually the better the project turns out. The more people have to look at it and get approvals and, touch it so they can say, they told the artist what to do. They're responsible for how good or bad it is. That's when things get watered down.
Especially when you got those people that are not doing shit in the company, but they want to make sure that they look like they're doing something. So they're like, I need to see that artwork at 3:00. And then they just go, I'm not approving the eyebrows on this. Or
they're like, can you just change the shirt to red that the character's wearing? Stuff like that.
Yeah,
they're like, I did that. I made him wear a red shirt.
Yeah, that's a lunacy. Let's tell everyone who you are real quick and, introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Brian Romero. I'm an illustrator and designer, cartoonist, guy who likes to make pictures.
And the guy who was responsible for this podcast, The Grail's artwork. And what a crushing job you did. I want to give a little history on that, how that happened. I am best friends with Kevin Christie. He's done most of my artwork for podcasts and other stuff. And I knew I wanted a specific look. And he was, I called him and said, I don't think that, he's got art shows coming up and all this stuff. And it was a different flavor this time. And he said, yeah, let's not have me try to do that. Let's go with this guy I know. And it was you right out of the gate. And I looked at a few things. I saw you did some stuff for Ari Shaffir. And one of the things that sold me on it was the Ari on the subway. And then I was like, this is the guy.
That was a fun piece.
Yeah. And I was really specific on what I wanted. I knew I loved Todd Shore, Robert Williams, Mark Ryden. I wanted this type of R. Crumb flavor, all of that. And I pitched it to you of exactly what I wanted. And you came back with a home run, man.
Well, thank you. And, it's a project where we're lucky that we're both on the same page and have the same visual references. So when you're throwing out your ideas to me, they put pictures right into my brain. I knew exactly what you're talking about, who you're talking about, and immediately started to have idea of like what I could bring to it and how I could deliver the vision for you.
Now let's get into your background. Where do you grow up and when do you first get into art? Mine, if we're going to get into this type of juxtapose stuff, I really learned about it from the Guns N' Roses Appetite for Destruction album cover that Robert Williams did later to be banned. But that's really when I find out about Robert Williams. But I grew up on R. Crumb, Fat Freddy's Cat, the Freak Brothers, and all that. But that specific album cover made me go seek out other artists and go to shows in LA. What is your background on that?
Well, before we get with the Wayback Machine, let's talk about the Appetite for Destruction piece by Robert Williams. That was also a turning point for me where I got to see that kind of artwork because I was pre-juxtaposed. I was living in, suburban Connecticut. There's no artwork like that around. So the only exposure to edgy artwork was album art, really, or like flyer art for posters. That was really kind of it. And I saw wasn't lucky enough to get the original one. It was inside the tape cover, had the original cover. That was banned, the Robert Williams one.
Oh, that's right. They moved it inside. Yeah.
Yeah. And it said his name, gave credits at Appetite for Destruction to Robert Williams. So I kind of took note of that. And when he also had a big spread in Thrasher magazine. So I was a skateboarder at the time. So that, I think they kind of came out in a similar, within a year of each other. So I went from seeing that one piece to seeing, a couple, maybe 4 or 5 pages in Thrasher magazine, an interview with Robert and a bunch of his paintings. And I was like, wow, this guy is amazing. He's taking all of these things that I'm into, which is, classic cartoons and hot rods and comic books, and kind of just mashing it together in his own, unique, explosive style.
It's funny because I look at like the early Robert Williams stuff, like the hot rod stuff, and that doesn't really appeal to me because I'm not into the 50s type of hot rods. I'm more into the Mopar late 60s stuff and Camaro and everything. But once he gets into that era of the Appetite for Destruction, so we talk about paintings like Rust Demon and that Jimmy Eats a Bad Oyster or whatever. So once he gets into that type of stuff, it really floors me. And that gallery down on Melrose, which is now on Hollywood Boulevard, they were kind of showing his stuff and other artists like this, and then I started learning like, wow. And the way Robert would do that, the paintings would tell stories.
Yeah, they're really deep. They were like kind of like a comic book all in itself without panels. They're just these big montages with, what I liked is he would show how characters are feeling using other characters. It'd be like little mini scenes behind the main scene, kind of expressing different things that were going on internally with the main characters. And I'd never seen, stuff done like that.
Yeah, I hadn't either. I mean, the way, let's say like Rust Demon, and you guys can Google this, the way it has like a kid stepping on a rusty nail and then a lock with a jaw, because you always heard if you stepped on a nail, you're going to get locked jaw. Like, I can't open my mouth, and then there was, this demon in the back of a swamp, and he was blasting like, lightning bolts of rust onto an old car. And I really related to all of that growing up early on of you don't want any cars with rust. And, the whole painting really spoke to me, and the Appetite Destruction one really was, I think the explosion of juxtaposed art. Of course, they start the magazine and everything, but I mean, that record sold so many copies, and I have the classic shirt and everything. People were starting to get into this stuff.
Yeah, I think that made it mainstream, or at least got into the eyeballs of a lot more people.
Yeah.
And then once Juxtaposed came, then everyone got exposed to it and it became kind of a whole movement.
Yeah. And there was this cool movement, the Clayton brothers, Mark Ryan, they were all similar, but totally different at the same time. And then I think there was this stagnant era where everybody was just doing the same type of art. Now it's kind of grown again. It did hit a kind of a wall for a while. Like everybody was kind of doing the Robert thing,
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to not want to do that when you see it because it's so appealing and so explosive that I get that. And the only person who's really taken that and gone even further with it is Todd Shore, who's, clearly influenced by Robert, but I can spot, when I see each of their pieces, there's no mistake to me who did each one. Like they each have their own,
100%.
Clear vision at this point.
Yeah. And it was funny because, I remember seeing all these paintings before they were $1 zillion. So, I mean, I went to a Mark Ryden show and Corky Ascends to Heaven was for sale. And I think it was $7,500. And at the time that might as well have been $1 million to me.
Yeah.
But I wanted that painting so bad. And it's still really the only painting I want to this day. I've owned quite a few Todd Shores, and, but that Mark Ryden Corky Ascends to Heaven is really the one, or Appetite for Destruction. I was at Barrett Jackson, I would say 15 years ago, and Appetite was for sale.
Whoa.
It was there. And it was weird. It was like when you go see the Mona Lisa, you think it's going to be giant, right? But it really wasn't big compared to all of Robert and Todd Shore's and Mark Ryden's paintings later became these huge, huge pieces, but it was a fairly small piece. And I don't know what it auctioned off for, but I really wanted it. It was just sitting there because Barrett Jackson had a side tent that was like rock memorabilia and guitars and shit the year I went. And I was like, what the fuck is that? Appetite for Destruction's here, you know? Wild.
Yeah, that'd blow my mind. I was fortunate enough to see a couple of Robert's shows that had a lot of stuff from different eras. And it's really cool to be in the same room as those pieces. They're even more impressive once you're there because his level of execution and the colors, the intensity of them, reproductions are great, but nothing is like standing in front of the real thing.
Yeah, I really learned later on. For me, I just can't go reproductions anymore. It's just as cool it is to look at the art. I'm much rather seek out a newer artist and buy a piece that I can afford and enjoy some real art on the wall, But I'm 54. Yeah. I'm over the posters in my house, I mean, there was a time where my whole house was Robert Williams prints framed and everything, Yeah,
I got one over my shoulder here.
I had that one. I know. Yeah, I knew that.
With the Mata Hari.
Yeah, I had that one. I saw it when you first came on. I recognized it. And they're great. They're great to have.
I still have to get that big coffee table book that came out. I don't know if it's this year or last year with kind of a retrospective of all the stuff, but definitely worth picking up. I got Todd Shore's book that came out, I think last year too. It's really.
Yeah, I actually got that too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big retrospective.
Yeah. I've owned some great Todd Shores actually. I had the Humpty Dumpty egg one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I had like three different ones. I sold one to a guy, and he put a hole through it.
Oh my God!
I know. He got it repaired, but it was like it. I think it fell off the wall or something, and then something went through it, and I was like, "Oh, dude."
Yeah, I'd cry over that.
Yeah. I'm the type of guy, like if somebody hits my car or motorcycle, I just sell it even if it's fixed. I'm like, this is out of here. So if that happened to me, I'd be like, I gotta get rid of this. So back in 88, 89, I'm not sure how old you are, but is that when you see it, or do you buy Appetite later in life?
I got it. Yeah, the year it came out, but not initially. One of my this is like junior high. One of the people I went to school with went out and to a vacation in California to visit family and came back with that, like brought it back to our community. Yeah. And he's like, listen to this. And I was like, oh, it's mind blowing. And then later on that year, that's when it started to get heavy rotation on MTV, when you start to see Welcome to the Jungle and stuff like that.
So what is your background on that? Do you think, are you one of those guys in high school or junior high that were drawing bands flyers, and were you drawing on your notebooks and everything? Or how do you say, all right, I want to start doing art?
Well, I've been drawing forever. Like ever since I could hold a pencil or crayon or whatever. My parents have drawings, I'm 46. They have drawings, from the, mid 70s from me, like lots of Star Wars, lots of Tom and Jerry or Muppets or stuff like that I was into as a kid, and I just never stopped drawing. So I've put in countless hours drawing stuff, and just as I encountered new things, I would just kind of add it to what I was into. And so that was a key time where more kind of edgy artwork got into my brain. And also it was a time when I was really into comic books. That's when comic books were shifting, and you got things like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns, things that were more cynical and subversive, kind of entered mainstream comics. And that brought me into the more underground stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. After the Freak Brothers and Fat Freddy's Cat, I only bought those comic books because they were so edgy and radical. I was like, well, these guys are like smoking weed and and swearing, in a comic book. But after that, I never got into comic books. I got a lot of friends that collect them and have them and everything, but it just wasn't for me, because it just was like you read it and then you were just done there, like in an afternoon, you're like, all right, that's done. They're worth a lot of money now, which is cool.
Yeah, they were meant to be disposable back then. And it's interesting because a lot of the artwork that influenced me was disposable artwork. Because comic books, you weren't no one, when those were invented or even when they're, got repopularized, no one was really collecting them at first. It was later on that became a collector's market. But kind of the end of high school was when the collector's market was huge for comic books. But, I was also into skateboarding. It's the same thing. No one was collecting decks back then. You would skate it until you broke it.
Yeah.
And then you'd get a new one.
That was it.
And that old one would get thrown away. And there's a cool a club near us in New Haven, Connecticut called the Tune-In. And they had a thing for a while. You could bring in an old deck, even if it was broken, and you'd get in either for free or half price or whatever. And they hung them up all around the club and around the bar. So it was a cool kind of way for them to grab some cheap decor.
Some of those early decks are so mind-boggling. They're so, like, when you see it, you just go, bam, it just comes to your mind instantly, a time period. For me, it's like Dwayne Peters, it's Dogtown. It's all of that early artwork on the bottom of these, the Santa Cruzes, all these skateboards were just beautiful. The Alva stuff, it's all beautiful artwork,
For me, the big stuff for me, like, that spoke to me. Again, I was a little bit younger, so I was into like the Jim Phillips stuff that he did at Santa Cruz, which was is much more cartoony. It still had a lot of gross stuff going on, or the Paulo Peralta stuff, the classic Bones Brigade, lots of like skeletons by VC Johnson. He's the guy who did all that stuff.
That stuff's amazing. And then, of course, we get into rock shirts. Pusshead. And he's crossing over from skateboarding and Metallica. And then we're just getting into some of these rock shirts are some of the best art I've ever seen in my life. I mean, Maidworn, my friend Blaine Haverson over there, he's got like 10,000 rock shirts. And when you look through these vintage shirts, it's just like, wow, who did this art? Because a lot of times it'd be the album cover, but if it wasn't, it was just spins of stuff. And the ones you really only know would be like Pusshead, because he signed the shirt. Yeah.
A lot of guys, you wouldn't know who it was because it's, either they didn't sign it or, even for me, some places they're like, yeah, we don't, we don't want your signature on it because this is our brand, and that's fine. Whatever. People
charge more for that.
No, but I mean, people are now cooler about it. And I promote their stuff. Whenever I work on something, if I like the piece, I'm going to post about it and talk about it too. So it works out for everybody if the artist is acknowledged that way.
Yeah. And think about all these band logos and everything. There's that famous story of the guy that did the AC/DC logo. I think they bought it for like $500. He was just an intern or whatever at Atlantic Records doing logos for bands. That was his gig. So there's a shitload of people that did logos out there that were just employees, Yeah.
I mean, there's, a lot of artwork when you're doing it for commercial purposes, you don't know if it's going to turn to something big or not.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to do this piece for that Rigs of Doom. I don't know if you've seen that and that one piece I did, he's used it tons of times, and I'm happy that he does because it's become kind of a classic thing for his brand.
Is that the sweatshirt I want?
No, that's the Alf one. The one I'm talking about has like a UFO over 70s van and all. It's like abducting all the amps and the cabs.
Yeah.
So I did that, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and he's still running that piece, and that makes me happy because he acknowledges me, and it's he sends me some product too. It's cool to have that stuff, but it's also cool to just be part, like a key piece of someone's brand.
So once you decide your way into this, do you go to school out there in Pasadena? Is that where you went?
No, I'm an East Coast guy. So I grew up in Connecticut, and I went to school at School of Visual Arts in Manhattan.
Oh, wow. And your idea was to do any kind of freelance art, or was it really like, I want to focus on this kind of, this type of art that we're talking about?
For me, it's so much of it comes back to comic books. That's what I really wanted to do at that time. I was like, I want to be a comic book guy. I want to, write and draw my own stuff. And I went to School of Visual Arts to study illustration. They do have a comic book program, but I wanted to be a little bit more well-rounded and not just hyper-focused on comic books. So I went for illustration. But once I got in there, they give you a foundation year where you don't do anything that's really related exactly to your major. It's like you have to take photography, you have to take sculpture, you have to take traditional drawing and painting. And, they want you to kind of get exposed to everything, which I think was really good, even though at the time I was a little frustrated by it. But it opened my mind up to other things. I got really into photography as well as, drawing and painting. And then second year, you get into your major. So that's when I got exposed to graphic design, because I was just thinking about the images. And one of my instructors, Sal Catalano, was like, yeah, this is a good piece you designed here, but there's no room for the logo, because it was a book cover assignment to create the image for the book cover. And he's like, you got to leave room for the typography. And I was like, typography? Someone else is going to put art over my art? And that's when I was like, fuck that. I got to learn graphic design.
Yeah.
So I got, I went down that rabbit hole, learning all about typography. And that's kind of a big part of what I do now, is I like to do custom hand-drawn typography.
Art is a lot like, I would say, music or comedy or any kind of art really is where people just figure like, hey man, you're just drawing that, man. So can't you just do it for like $25? I mean, these people that just think that since you can do it, you should do it free. Isn't that pretty wild?
Yeah. Or because you love doing it, or, people, sometimes they'll see me draw stuff and they're like, wow, you did that, pretty fast. And they think that's, I should charge less because I can do it fast. Like, no, I charge more because I can do it quickly, because it takes years to get to the point where you can execute something that quickly.
That's so true. And I got fucking student loans. You know what I mean? I went to school for this. I'm not a graffiti artist out there. I didn't just buy a can of paint and just spray your wall real quick. And those guys should get all the money also, because that's a skill, Yeah,
it's funny how art is so valued but not valued at the same time. Like, it enriches everybody's life. People talk about, all these shows, these movies, these TV shows, these video games, stand up, all this stuff that enriches their lives. But then you're like, hey, can you throw in a few bucks for it? People are like, I don't know about that.
It's unreal. I mean, I've got 100,000. Over 150,000 now. I had 180,000 downloads last month of the podcast, and I got 347 Patreoners, and thank God I have those guys during this COVID and everything. But you're like, wait a minute, where's these other people? I always say that if the podcast went away tomorrow, there'd be 357 people that would be bummed, and the rest would just find new free content.
And I understand it to a certain degree when it comes to podcasts, because I support some podcasts, but I cannot afford to support all the podcasts that I'm into. So I try to prioritize who am I listening to the most, and try and subscribe to those people. And it's hard when then there's you have your Netflix you want to subscribe to,
I get it.
Hulu or whatever, all starts to add up. And I was just talking to my wife about, all right, can we delete some of these services, or at least temporarily until the shows we like come back on? Yeah. Because sometimes you're like, oh, especially Netflix. I'm like, all right, it's been 3 months since I've even looked at Netflix.
Yeah. I get it. You're right there, man. I mean, I understand it. And like I said, I'm very lucky to have 347 people. Thank God. I remember when I started the Patreon, I had 5 people for years, but I do think that you have to remind people that this stuff is hard. And it's a lot of work. A podcast is 7 days a week, booking the guest, editing it, posting it up, paying to post it up. It costs money to post it up. But it's, you got to remind them, hey, this is a lot of work. And then they go, oh, that's right. But, like I said, no complaints. It's, we're alive and we're working and we're doing what we love, you know?
Yeah, and I think we're at the beginning of people getting used to paying for directly to individual creators. You know, it's really only started in the past 5 years where people are starting to get into that. And there's some people who are making amazing livings that are visual artists, podcasters, whatever, just doing this stuff. And it's about, I think, just finding the right audience, the people who are willing to pay for what you're doing. And they're out there. It's just reaching those people. And again, we're at the beginning of this. So I think it's going to get better over the next few years as more people engage in this kind of content.
Well, there's I mean, you know, look, I looked at your Instagram stuff and then I was like, I'm in, you know, this digital world, especially of Instagram. I'm doing Instagram lives now and people can tip me while I'm on talking about stuff like a record or a movie or whatever. And, you know, sometimes I get 30, 40 bucks in a day and that shit helps, man. You know,
absolutely. It all adds up.
It really does. It really does. And I thank God for that type of stuff. I take it on like a full-time job now. Okay. I got an Instagram today at like 11. Then I'm going to podcast at noon. Then I'm going to post 3 photos. Then I'm going to book a podcast guest or whatever it is. You know, it's a full gig.
That's something that people have to understand when you're in a creative field and you're working for yourself is the amount of, you got to be ready for this. This is not a job where you have, you know, your big daddy giving you a check every 2 weeks and you can just kind of chill. You have to be constantly working and it's, you know, you're kind of never off the clock.
No, you're not. You have no hours. There's no 9 to 5. It's from when you wake up to when you fucking fall asleep. That's when you're working, you know?
Absolutely. So you have to be prepared for that. And this, you know, this kind of life isn't for everybody. You have to be willing to work harder than everybody else to make it in any sort of freelance creative field where you're your own boss.
At what point do you become a full-time artist? I'm sure you get out of school and you're like, all right, I'm ready. Did you take some kind of a corporate job or did you just work a day job and then freelance?
Well, there's, at that time, it was the .com era was exploding. That was the first internet boom. And it was in the mid 90s. Yep. And I'd learned to do basic HTML just to make my own portfolio site. It's something that like was, you know, it was pretty easy at the time. So I learned how to do that. And then I got a part-time job kind of teaching some digital tools while I was still in school. And then I'd met a designer named Mike Essel, who was about to start his own studio when he graduated from the Cooper Union called The Chopping Block. And he offered me a job there. And I actually dropped out of art school after my 3rd year to go work for them. And, wow. You know, they were a cool up and coming design shop. And I was doing a mix of illustration, graphic design, and even some light coding.
Wow.
So that was my initial, you know, jump into the professional world.
So do you hook up with Ari through your love of comedy, or were you living in New York at the time, or how does this collab happen?
That happened was I was here, I moved to LA in 2007. And at that point I was like, I'm going freelance. I'd kind of worked my way up through the .com and internet advertising game, working into, you know, large scale advertising agencies. And I just burned out in that. I was like, that's not what I came here for. It's not what I went to school for. I want to do what I want to do, which is be an illustrator and artist. So I got laid off, fortunately, because it's hard to sometimes quit those golden handcuff type situations.
It really is.
Because you get addicted to that again. Every 2 weeks you have a check.
And healthcare and whatever.
Yeah, all that stuff. So I just took that as an opportunity. Like, all right, I'm going to have to suck it up. Like, this is my chance to go do my thing. So I started doing freelance projects for a while, and then my wife and I decided we're going to move from New York because our rent got raised. We were living in Brooklyn, and we're like, let's try something totally different. And I was like, what about Los Angeles? And we're like, let's do it. So we moved out here, and I'm not sure who reached out to me for the Ari job. I can't recall. I got in a phone call with Ari, and he is kind of like our situation. He had a vision for it that was pretty articulated in his mind. And he thought that I could, you know, deliver what he was looking for. And it was a pretty painless project. You know, he had his ideas. I took detailed notes and then started sketching stuff up for him. And, you know, I love comedy. So it was, and, you know, he's an edgy guy. So it fit the kind of artwork I was doing. You know, I was doing a lot of skateboard artwork at the time, which is very, you know, I hate using the word edgy, but it was just that kind of stuff where it's like things that would, offend your parents as a teenager. You know, I feel like I make artwork for teenagers, for angry teens.
Yeah. Well, we're all angry teens at heart.
Exactly.
Know? Still got it pent up in us. What was your introduction to comedy? Were you watching? I wasn't really watching much comedy in the 90s because I was out playing music. Of course, for me, it's like early on the Pryors, the Carlins, the Bob Newhart, the Jonathan Winters, the Cheech and Chong, and then I get into Hicks and Dice and Kinnison, and then it's Chris Rock and Martin, and then I just drop off until 15 years ago. Were you watching comedy on Comedy Central, or do you get into it like in the last 15 years or so?
Well, kind of like you, it started off like as kids we're listening to, of course, like Eddie Murphy, Raw. And so it was like Eddie Murphy, Dice Clay, Carlin. And then kind of like later in that zone, it was kind of Bill Hicks.
Yeah.
And then kind of dropped off. And then we moved out to LA. That's when, the comedy scene was here. Like we could go out and go see this stuff all the time. So my wife and I would go to, the store or go to the Ice House.
Yeah.
Now we live over close to the Ice House. That was kind of our spot to go to.
Yeah. Great room.
I mean, I've seen a lot of cool shows there, and it's very intimate. You're close to whoever's up there.
What's cool about the Ice House is it feels like a road gig, but you're 5 minutes from home. It feels like you're really in another, city or state somewhere, and you can just work a bunch of new material and feel safe away from the industry to try this stuff out. And the audiences are always great, and the room was great, Yeah,
I take that place. I'll be stoked when we can all go back to doing that.
Yeah, the Bus family bought that. You know that?
No.
Yeah, like Jeannie Buss, I think, and her brother bought it right before COVID, and I think they're like remodeling it right now. So that'll be interesting to see what that's like when it opens back up.
I hope they don't. The problem with remodels and things like that, it's like that place had a vibe because it had been around a while,
right?
And like it had a kind of charming griminess to it. And sometimes when you you take those places over, you don't want to clean up too much. It loses some of the mojo.
I think they were just had some ideas of like, when you walked into the showroom right before there was that kind of that weird dining area that made no sense. I think they're going to knock that wall out and just make the showroom bigger,
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Which would be really cool. I think that's the oldest comedy club in America.
That's what I've heard.
Yep. That is the word. I mean, any club that had the Smothers Brothers working, it's got to be ancient. When you get to LA, are you going to these amazing shows like Mary Karnowski and these people that have these galleries featuring these great artists? Are you going to that stuff once you get here? It's got to be mind-boggling, right?
Definitely. Like, that's kind of peak, juxtapose pop surrealism. And also the street art was huge at that point. There's that Mr. Brainwash show that was epic.
And then that movie really kickstarted that next phase. The exit through the, what is that?
Exit through the gift shop.
Yeah, that's fucking great film. But those guys, they were doing that street art. That stuff's great, right? There's a guy right now around town. I'm trying to get him on the podcast. He's does the Rubik's Cube heads.
Oh, I haven't seen that. No.
Oh, yeah. It's just like people and their heads are Rubik's Cubes. God, they're really good, man.
Yeah, we're lucky. LA has a lot of cool street art. So if you go, especially downtown, there's lots of walls that rotate artists, or there's stuff that's up there all the time. One of my friends, he's Love Yo Dreams on Instagram. He's got some cool pieces downtown. He's got a show opening in Oaxaca, Mexico.
Wow.
But there's just, I mean, LA for artists is, especially the time I moved here, is perfect timing for me. There's a lot going on in the fine art world, street art, also in the commercial scene, like all the animation, all the TV shows, cartoons.
Yeah.
I fell in doing skateboard art, which I didn't come here planned to do that. I really was going to try to go into the animation scene. I really love cartoons also, and just ended up like getting introduced to that scene through my stepsister. Her boyfriend, now husband, was a professional skater and knew all the guys in that scene, and just was like, "Hey, you want to do some skateboard artwork?" I'm like, "Sure." And then I ended up doing that, and I still do skateboard artwork, but I worked in-house at Baker Boys doing stuff for Baker, Death Wish, Volume 4. And then post that, I still did work for them, even after I left and was going freelance, did work for them. And then also Birdhouse, Creature, Santa Cruz, Slime Balls, all that classic stuff. I got to, touch those brands and do pieces for them.
That's amazing. You got any boards laying around there right now we could see?
I've got tons of stuff.
Let's just see like one of your boards.
Yeah, hold on. Let me move the screen here.
Oh yeah, cool.
Hold on one sec.
I know Kevin Christie was doing he's doing skateboards also, Kevin Christie.
Let's see here.
Oh yeah, that's fucking great, dude. Wow, love the 45 inserts in his eyes. Ah, yeah, that's great too.
So this is totally inspired by Jim Phillips. He did a Rob Roscott board in the 80s where it's a big ugly face. So I like to do, this is like a big Yeti gorilla type thing. So I like to do that stuff. This is one for Death Wish for Liz.
Now that's the kind of stuff I love right there. Remember that? What was that? Wacky Packages and and then what was the hot rod ones called?
I don't remember what those are called. I remember the Wacky Packages. Yeah. I did a cult, that's a big thing in skateboarding, is kind of doing parodies of things. Yeah. We did a Wacky Packages parody at Death Wish and like Garbage Pail parodies with all, and I got to, what I liked about that job is really working with the riders themselves. They would come in and out of the office and sitting down with them and learning about who they are, what their interests are, inside jokes in the industry, and kind of putting them into the artwork.
How great was Wacky Packages, man? I mean, like Crest, it would be Crust.
Yeah.
I remember there was one, it was like Coke or something, and it was just worms coming out of it. Just all of those are just beautiful. I mean, I wonder who did those. Those definitely have an R. Crumb vibe too,
They're escaping me. So, there's a bunch of guys that worked on those. Same with the Garbage Pail Kids. There's a bunch of different guys that worked on them. But that information is all available if you Google. But you should definitely check out those artists. You can find high resolution scans of the original paintings online too, if you want to see, how the sausage was made.
Were those Wacky Packages actual full-on paintings?
Yeah, they're little they're small size, like maybe 8.5 by 11 or 9 by 12 paintings. Same with Garbage Pail Kids. They're like smaller size.
Oh man, they ever come up for sale? I'd love to get one of those Wacky Packages,
They're out there.
Yeah. I'm going to look on eBay.
Yeah, they're out there. I mean, the Wacky Packs are definitely on the more expensive side because, there's the people our age and older that are, remember growing up with that stuff. And now that they have, our generation has some money, they're buying that stuff up.
That's what happens. You get a little dumb money. Like instead of buying a house, you're like, oh, I got a Wacky Packages painting and an Evel Knievel pinball. Pinball, well, another fucking art, all the art, the back glasses on pinball.
Yeah, that stuff's amazing too. One of my uncles, he had a bunch of pinball machines in his basement, and he also had art, like video games too. So going to visit him was always a good time. He had like Charlie's Angels pinball machine. He had Dig Dug and Galaga in his basement.
Those two, Dig Dug and Galaga. Oh my God. Those are just cocaine to me, dude. Those games are crack.
Yeah. Miss Pac-Man's one of my favorite from that era too. I just, those are the games I like. I quit playing video games after Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Like I realized like spending way too much time in this fake world.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm like, I always tell people like, I know not to even fucking sit down for that because my life would just disappear. I know to me, they're like narcotics. I'm like, I'm just going to stay away from that because I know what's going to happen.
Totally. My brother, he's a video game developer. He's a game director, actually. So he's the one who's kind of like a director in a movie, directing these video games. And he's working on VR stuff. And not this past Thanksgiving, but the one before, he came by with a whole new VR kit. And he's like, do you want to check this stuff out? Because I'd never done it before.
Yeah.
So it's my first time doing any sort of VR stuff. And afterwards, I was like, that's amazing. He's like, so you're gonna get a kit? I'm like, no, dude, I'd have no career. My marriage would be over. Like, I can't have this in my house.
I know. You can't. You can't. It's like, I remember I put on the VR goggles and I was looking at, it was like a Circus Soleil type of thing, and the people were like, I was in the circus. And I was like, oh, wow. Now, if you add like laser guns to this and stuff, I'm like, I wouldn't be leaving the house. I wouldn't write a joke ever again.
Yeah, I mean, the few things that I got to test were all just so immersive, and within 5 minutes, you just forget that you're in your own living room.
Yeah,
and but no, I love video games so much that I can't play them. It's like it would be bad for my life.
Well, I got to tell you, man, you absolutely killed it with the artwork. I see it every day. When I'm on my YouTube channel or when I'm posting up stuff, and I just got the shirt ready. There's going to be a shirt. So nice. I got the shirt for you, but I see it and I just fucking love it. I just love it.
Is a piece I really got to like nerd out on. Like there's certain things where like, I kind of can't help myself where it's like this concept's so good. I know if I really push myself, this is going to be like one of these epic pieces that people are going to talk about for a long time. So I just knew that was the opportunity I had. And I put a lot of time, thought, just hours into the details, working with you, making sure you were stoked on it too. Cause I want to be that piece that we're both at the end, like, wow, this is amazing. So I thank you for the opportunity to do it.
Every time I post it up, every time people go, man, fantastic art. Every time. And then, of course you were making it. And I had the idea of, the idea, just so people know, if you look at it, there's a couple things on there. There's the address. And people are like, what's up with the address? Any thing? Well, it sent you over a photo of a classic New York Lower East Side kind of shop front, and you saved the address. And then my buddy Steve McDonald was like, whoa, man, you know what these three numbers together mean? And it's all this all this like numerology or whatever you fucking call it, hippie shit. And I was like, wow, that's pretty fucking cool. But the idea was, of course, that the podcast is basically it's a dream store that doesn't exist. Each week you put it on an episode, and it's like, and that's what the painting is. It's like you're walking down the street and there it is. It's whatever you're into. I'm into that stuff that's into the window, and the trunk is blown open and all this stuff's pouring out. And it's basically whatever you're into, that's a dream store. So say you're into comic books and skateboards and let's say, video games and music or whatever. It's everything in one shop, which doesn't exist. But each week on the Grail, it could exist. And you nailed it with the painting, And while it happened, I had a guitar in there. Eddie Van Halen passed away. And I was like, well, let's do an homage. Let's give him some love on that, which was cool. We got to do that.
Absolutely. Because initially, I was thinking like 59 Les Paul, because I'm a guitar player and guitar nerd. So, to me, that's the holy grail of guitars. But when, after Eddie's passing, I was definitely like, yeah, let's pay tribute to, the most important guitar player since Jimi Hendrix.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What guitars you got now? I see you on Instagram and you got some cool guitars.
Back in my .com days, I bought two 59 Les Paul reissues.
What years?
So those were from 2003 and 2004. 59 reissues, two different colors. Got the tobacco and the regular cherry sunburst.
Oh wow!
I have a 90s like Dan Electro U2, and then I have two parts casters that I have.
Oh, you built them, right?
That are I assembled them. Bought the parts, had MJT paint them, and then I just put them together. I have one that's like a Keith Richards style Telecaster with the humbucker in the neck.
Oh yeah.
And I have a late early 60s style Stratocaster, like Fiesta Red. I love that color.
That's my favorite. Daphne Blue, Fiesta Red, and Seafoam Green. Those are the ones.
Yeah. I like those really, specific early 60s colors, the custom colors. They were really cool.
Shale pink. Oh my God.
So yeah, guitar playing is, music. If I'd spent as much time drawing as I did playing guitar, I could have gone that way if I had put those hours in. But my first love was visual arts. So I always, put more time into that. But for now, playing guitar, it's like kind of like therapy. I have to do it like for 10 or 15 minutes a day minimum, just to straighten my head out.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to doing some more projects with you. And, hopefully we get a hat together, and like I said, you killed it. Tell everybody where they can get a hold of you at on your Instagram, or how can they hire you?
Sure. The Instagram's a great way to reach me. It's just at Brian Romero, all one word. You can find me there. Also my website, which is just brianromero.com, which I'll be updating in the first couple months of the new year. I have a lot of stuff to add. It's not easy to keep up with all the pieces and keep adding them to the site. So Instagram is kind of my default portfolio at this point.
Well, thanks, man, for doing the show. Thank you so much for the crushing artwork. And, the artwork is so good that I got to make sure that the podcast is that good each week. It's put a high watermark on it, which is really cool. And like I said, I can't wait to do another project with you, and we'll get something together, man.
Absolutely. And I'm enjoying the podcast, kicking off with Grover Jackson, to all the people you've had on, listen to every episode. And, thanks for having me on. You
got it, man. You're number 6, episode number 6 tomorrow.
Excellent.
Well, thank you. And I hope to see you soon, and stay healthy. Have a great holiday. And everybody follow him on Instagram, and don't contact him if you want a job done for $30 or something. You know what I mean? Like, hey man, maybe you can do my band's demo tape cover. Anyway, I love you, buddy.
All right. Take care, Dean. Thanks for having me on.
I'll talk to you soon.